You are my African queen, the girl of my dreams. You take me where I never been. You make my heart go ring-a-ling-a-ling. You are my African queen, the girl of my dreams. You remind me of a thing, and that is African beauty. Hello, Home Slices, and welcome back to Sup Media Reviews. Season 2 is here, and we're kicking things up a notch. We're diving into music, TV, and movies from over 20 years ago, plus we're kicking off a brand new YouTube series that's going to bring even more fun your way. This season is full of fresh reviews, special guests, and plenty of laughs. Ready to jump in? Let's get into this week's episode. What is up, Home Slices? I'm Kiara, the host of the Sup Media Reviews podcast, where we revisit movies, TV shows, music, and all kinds of media that are at least 20 years old to find out if it still holds up today and if it's worth revisiting. Now, we're in the month of March, and that means it's Women's History Month. This month, I've got 3 top 5 episodes plus 2 movie reviews, and some of those releases will have a Women's History Month theme. So today, we're kicking things off with a film that's celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. Phat Girlz, featuring the one and only Nique. It came out in 2006, y'all. So we're going to talk about whether or not it holds up today or if it should be left in the past. Now, a few fun facts. This movie was written and directed by Nique. I want to do her name justice, so I looked it up. Now, this was her directorial debut. She's the daughter of a U.S. civil rights activist mother and an Ethiopian father, so that background shows up in her work. She does a lot of work with cross-cultural relationships, where at least one partner is a member of the continental African diaspora, which is something that we don't get to see very often, so it's nice that she brought her personal life into her work. Also, this movie has a type of patina that reminds me of Nigerian dramas, which is something I really love. So if you want to check out this movie, it's available on Tubi for free, so you have no excuse to check it out. Now let's talk about my personal connection to this film. I'm a plus size woman, and I'm reviewing the movie through that lens, and that's what I do on, every episode. Okay, all right. So you see this right here. This is the counterbalance. When your grandma is seasoning those greens, beans, potatoes, tomatoes, all of that. And that's, what the Tony Chachere's and the Laurie's is all resting on, okay? So I got that right here. I just made some greens last week. But anyways, I can joke about that because I'm about, 85% deconstructed from my own internalized fat phobia. The other 15% is still kind of a work in progress for me because we live in a world that is constantly reinforcing that certain bodies are more valuable than others. Okay. And here's where I have landed when it comes to my body. My body is a vessel. I appreciate it. I love it. And over time, I recognized that a lot of the shame and kind of self-doubt that I carried didn't necessarily come from my body, but from societal expectations and systems that were never designed with me in mind or that were uniquely positioned to take advantage of my insecurity. So the more I've deconstructed from that, the more I've been able to actually live and not wait around to be a certain size or for some future version of myself. I'm living my life right now in this body as I am. Okay, so let me jump down from my soapbox, all right? As a plus size woman, as a person who's been plus size for a long time, it's actually kind of rare to see someone like me as a romantic lead or as an object of genuine desire. So this movie centers 2 plus size Black women who are admired, pursued, and the center of their own love story. And as a teenager when this came out, I needed that. So let's go ahead and get into this movie. Now, real quick, I'm trying to make these episodes more digestible because now that I'm on camera, I ramble apparently. So I'm going to give you a solid summary of the movie first and then jump straight into my commentary, okay? And try not to drag it out. So here we go. Here's what happens in the movie Phat Girlz. We have our main character, who is Jasmine Biltmore. She is played by Monique. Now, Jasmine is a plus-size woman in a world that clearly was not built for her. And the movie makes that very literal. She works at a department store named Bloomfield's, and, sometimes she has to work in the plus-size section, which carries nothing but clothes that look like they belong on somebody's grandma or somebody's grandma's couch, okay? Now, as an aspiring fashion designer, she wears her own creations because she really refuses to look frumpy just because the fashion industry has not caught up to her. She's bold, outspoken, sharp-tongued, and she had to develop that as a kind of armor. So growing up as a bigger girl, people came for her constantly. And so at some point she made a decision, and there's a quote in the movie where she says, "If I couldn't get respect because I wasn't a stick, I'd get respect for being a stone." And I was like, go ahead, girl. That to me is like Real Housewives of Atlanta line. Okay. But I feel like it tells you everything about her character. But underneath that toughness, Jasmine is battling some serious internalized fat phobia, right? She has diet pills that she's taking a lot of them, attempts at working out, a desperate belief that being smaller is the key to everything that she wants. And so she's fighting all of the external pressures of the world as well as the internal pressures that she puts on herself at the same time. So the one person who has always seen her differently is her grandma, Nellie. This was her safe space. She consistently spoke beauty and worth over Jasmine without conditions. And that love becomes the seed of everything that changes for Jasmine later in the story. So keep that in mind. Now, her best friend, Stacy, is dealing with the same thing, but kind of in an opposite way. Now, where Jasmine is loud and confrontational as an armor, Stacy has decided to make herself invisible, which is a totally different defense mechanism. She has thick glasses, baggy clothes. Her hair is always pulled back in a ponytail. She says things like, "I'm too big to be showing skin." And so she has the same kind of wound that Jasmine does, but the scar looks different, which I think is really interesting. And then there is Mia, who is Jasmine's cousin. She is slim and conventionally attractive. Mia genuinely loves her cousin Jasmine, but her presence creates this tension because whenever Mia walks in the room, Jasmine becomes invisible. And so they share the house that their grandmother left for them, their late grandmother left for them. And so these three women end up winning an all expense paid trip to Palm Springs, courtesy of a sweepstakes from Jasmine's diet pills. And things, of course, don't start very well. Okay. The ladies are trying to get spa services and the spa robes don't fit. They're trying to get massages and the massage tables are too small. And so the world again has not really made space for them. But then enter these Nigerian doctors. Now, there are a group of Nigerian men at the resort for a medical conference, including Dr. Tunde and Dr. Akibo. Now, these are conventionally attractive and very fit men who are not even looking at, skinny Miss Mia. They're looking at Jasmine and Stacy. Now, according to them, in Nigerian culture, the fuller figure woman is associated with beauty and desirability and prosperity. Okay. A bigger woman is the standard. And so there's this pool scene that happens where Tunde gets out of the pool and he's glistening and he's, muscular and, Mia, being the thin, kind of muscular fit woman she is, assumes that he, would want to be with her, but he kind of looks past her and he wants to know who Jasmine is. And Jasmine is so stunned because this never happens that she basically says nothing. She's on mute. Now, meanwhile, Dr. Tunde's friend Akibo sets his sight on Stacy. So we get to slowly watch her come out of her shell, and it's genuinely kind of sweet. And Mia, for the first time, the tables have turned on her and she is the girl that's being overlooked. Now, over time, Jasmine and Tunde, as well as Akibo and Stacy, are all spending time together, either together or separately. They go to this fundraiser together where you get to see Nigerian garb, Nigerian food, dances, other traditions. Other men are even hitting on them because they also like these women's body types. So this really is an opportunity where things, the tables are really turned, right? So individually, Jasmine and Tunde spend some time together. It's really sweet and romantic, but overall, Jasmine can't really fully receive it. She keeps waiting for the catch. She doesn't know if it's really genuine. And things end up falling apart when she misreads the situation and assumes that Dr. Tunde ditched her to date a skinny white woman. And she ends up pushing him away before he can hurt her first. So they leave Palm Springs early because of how embarrassed and hurt she is, and she spends 3 days in bed binge eating, super depressed, and then she kind of hits this wall in a hilarious way, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. She has a raw cathartic breakdown. She throws her diet supplements everywhere. She destroys the mannequin that represents, her weight goals. She screams basically at the concept of, fat phobia itself, and nearly destroys everything in her room. But in the middle of all of that, in the breakdown, she calls out to her deceased grandma Nellie, and she hears her grandma's voice. And so all of those years of her grandma, positively affirming her granddaughter, the years that she had been telling her that she was beautiful and worthy and enough, finally lands for Jasmine. And so the next day, she cleans her room, she looks at her nude body in the mirror, and she says positive things about herself. And so something clearly has shifted, and everything else shifts along with it. I mean, from there, her whole life changes. She pitches her fashion line to the buyer at her workplace, Bloomfeld's, and within a year, her plus size clothing brand, which she names Thick Madame, after what Tunde told her plus size women are called in Nigeria, they end up going global. And so she's rich now. They're at a fashion show in Paris where she's showing off her designs. And so she decided that she wanted to go to Nigeria to find Tunde. She shows up in a hideous kitty cat wig. And while she's not necessarily trying to get Tunde back, she does want to at least thank him and have some closure because he was the catalyst that helped to change her life. Fortunately for us and her, he is still single, so they reunite. Stacey and Akibo also reunite because she brought her girls with her to Nigeria. And the movie ends with Jasmine saying that she wants to keep the lights on during a sexy rendezvous because she's done hiding. She wants to be seen fully as she is, and she can fully accept that Tunde really loves and appreciates her for who she is. So that's the movie. Now let's get into my commentary on it. All right, let's start with the characters. Okay, we have Jasmine Biltmore. So Jasmine, of course, is played by Monique, and she's one of the more layered characters that I've seen in what is technically a romantic comedy. On the surface, she's loud, funny, confrontational when she needs to be, and she will not let anyone slide verbally or physically if they disrespect her. There's a whole altercation at a restaurant called Fat Ass Burger in the movie. It's so funny. But it says everything it needs to say about fast food culture in this country, okay? I'm going to show you like a picture of the menu here. It's pretty funny. But there's a worker that works there that insults her, and she basically goes word for word, blow for blow with him in a yo mama battle. And while it's a little bit corny, I feel like people don't really do yo mama jokes no more. But when he results to calling her a slur because he's losing the battle, she punches him. And it's like, he deserved that. We get it, okay? There's also the bank scene. So she decides to go to a bank at some point to try to get a business loan using her grandmother's house that she inherited as collateral. And so the loan officer tells her that she doesn't qualify for the loan, essentially because it's in a Black neighborhood. Okay, so we got the gentrification, discrimination stuff included in here as well. And so when she calls that out, he hides behind the equal opportunity policy and then suggests that she do Jenny Craig in the same breath, y'all. She goes off on him. And again, it's understood. Okay, we understand why. So we know that this kind of hard exterior of hers didn't come from nowhere. She was teased relentlessly as a child, while her skinny cousin Mia did nothing to defend her. Kids had these rhymes for her. Fatty 2x4 can't get through the cafeteria door is what they said, which figure out your rhyme scheme, kids. But anyways, she made a choice that if she couldn't get respect just off the strength of being a kind human being, that she was going to be a stone, like she said. And that one exception to that wall was her grandma, who really loved her and created a self space for her without there being any condition. So underneath all of that fire, Jasmine genuinely believes that thinness is kind of this prerequisite for the things that she wants in her life, whether that's love, success, the creation of her clothing line, anything she wants in life. She needs to be a size 5 before she gets there. She's not necessarily fully waiting to live her life, but she's like waiting to deserve it. And that's the issue. And it's like, when she can't achieve that body, like when she realizes that she can't achieve that body, that's part of what causes that break, that break for her. And so when Tunde enters the picture, she's genuinely shocked to not be invisible in Mia's shadow. He woos her with a horse-drawn carriage. He's asking her about her dreams. He's not rushing her into anything physical, even though she like totally wants to. We hear her inner monologue and she is ready to jump his bones, but he pumps the brakes a little bit. He also does something that I can't stand, where he like challenges her on some respectability politics about her use of the word bitch colloquially. And it's like, stay out of women's business, Tunde. Okay. I don't do tone policing, and she didn't ask for your feedback. Okay. What people say in their communities is their business. All right. But he also says something that I found genuinely revolutionary when I watched this as a teen. Okay. When she tells him about how her life is going to be so much better when she's a size 5, he's like, as a medical professional, I'm telling you, you'll never be a size 5. And basically was telling her her body is not built that way genetically. And I was like, I literally have never in my life anywhere ever heard anyone say that, let alone a medical professional. Because it's so interesting sometimes going to the doctor or seeking the help of a medical professional. They almost always cite your weight as the reason for if something's wrong with you. And I'm not saying that losing weight won't help you or won't mitigate risk with your health. I'm not saying that. But for a lot of people, you go in with a toothache and they're like, well, your fat ass shouldn't have been eating candy. Like that's the attitude. So to hear a medical professional, even if they're playing one, in a movie, tell a woman based on your frame and the way you're built and your genetics and, all the biological stuff, you're probably never going to be a size 5. And you need to figure out how to love yourself for the way you are right now. And so for me, low-key revolutionary. Okay. And I think it's important for us to realize that some bodies are just not meant to be small. And I'm not saying that, certain levels of weight are always healthy. We know that they are associated with increased instances of things like heart attacks and strokes. I think everyone has to think about their own level of fitness and whatnot. But there are skinny people whose metabolisms are really well and they have heart attacks too. And so it's not necessarily just fat that creates health issues for people. And so it really is not a one size fits all. And I like that that's a part of the message of this movie. I feel like it lands that for some people, having more weight is just how they are. I'm a bigger girl. I always have been. Blood pressure always has been normal. Just got my hormone levels checked and everything. Also normal. Like besides my weight, I don't really have that many health issues. Well, I have sleep apnea, but that has more to do with the way, my facial structure is, but we're working on getting that fixed too. So yeah, anyways, I thought that was a very interesting way to handle that conversation. And I think it might have been like a gut punch to Jasmine as well. And so there comes a time where she self-sabotages the relationship with Tunde when she misreads him with a colleague. He's out with a colleague, a skinny white woman. She assumes that he's dating her, but it is a meeting with a colleague. She falls apart after that. She embarrasses herself and basically tells him, we're kidding ourselves if we thought this could ever work. So back home, she has 3 days of depression and binge eating. And then she has that breakdown that we talked about earlier. She throws away her pills. She hears her grandmother's voice and she chooses herself. And Monique did a great job of that breakdown. Not only did it have some humor sprinkled in, so it wasn't totally, dramatic or like off the tone of the fact that this is a rom-com, but she was like drooling and she was calling out for her grandma in a way that felt really genuine. So she acted her behind off in here, but there were still some funny moments to add in a little bit of levity as well. So she hears her grandmother's voice, she chooses herself, and the next day she's a different person. So what I love most is that in this story, Tunde is not her savior, and I really appreciate that. He just cracked something open in her. And it was her grandmother's love, the love that she finally let herself accept, that actually rescued her. So she rescued herself. Her grandmother rescued her, not Tunde. And so in the last scene, when she is intimate with Tunde and she's keeping the lights on and everything, she's not hiding anymore. And so Tunde gets to be the catalyst that gets her to the next stage, and not the white knight that came and saved her, which is something I really appreciate about this story. So let's talk about Stacy. Now, Stacy is played by Kendra C. Johnson, and Stacy's arc is a little quieter, but it is just as important as Monique's, okay, or Jasmine's. Now, whereas Jasmine fights, Stacy has decided to retreat. She has essentially accepted that this is her life, that she's not going to get the things that she wants. She's not going to get the men that she wants. She kind of has this Eeyore depressive energy about her life. And so she asks questions like, how is it that everyone has someone except for us? She's not angry about it. She's just kind of resigned. So you can see it in physically how she shows up and presents, right? She has long dresses in muted colors, thick glasses, hair always pulled back. And, you know, she says she's too big to show skin. And so she decided that if she made herself invisible, then she can avoid rejection. And, you know, like I said, the same kind of wound as Jasmine, but it just presents differently. And then Akibo enters, and the movie does something really smart here by making a big distinction between these two ladies. Whereas Jasmine and Tunde are a slower, romantic burn, Stacy and Akibo are immediately hot. And I appreciate that contrast, because I think it would have been really easy to give the kind of buttoned up character this really chaste storyline, but the movie does not do that. Akibo sees Stacy and is genuinely attracted to her. He tells her she's beautiful, that she should let herself be seen, and then something unlocks in her. Okay, they have this really sexual relationship. I think that it is tastefully done in this movie. It's hot and heavy, but it's not exploitative or fetishizing. There are two people that are genuinely attracted to each other. And I love that Stacy is also very clear-eyed, that she is not like, oh, he's the only man who's paid me any attention, so now I need to glom onto him and he'll be my only person. Stacy goes into it knowing that this is lust, okay? This is not a love thing, okay? The movie doesn't judge her for that. It lets her have that without making her seem like she's an immoral woman. And, you know, by the end of the trip, she's in a bathing suit, she's showing skin, and she's coming home different. She's more open, more willing to take up space. She's dressing differently. She feels differently. She thinks about herself differently. And she tells Jasmine that this trip was just a sign of things to come. And she's totally right. And so essentially she kind of has the same destination as Jasmine, right? She loves herself, she accepts herself, and she knows that she doesn't have to wait around to be a certain person or be a certain size to get to the place that she wants to be in her life. So she kind of takes a different road, but they both end up at the place where they really love themselves. And I love that they put her in this casual sexual relationship in sex scenes, which is something that we don't get to see very often with plus size people. And on top of that, Akibo and Tunde are both physically fit men. And so to see larger women with these physically fit men that are more fit, a more male standard of beauty, if that's what you want to call it, is also very, very good and very interesting, and that we don't see very often. So let's talk a little bit about Mia. Okay, so Mia is Jasmine's skinny, thin cousin who is played by Joyful Drake. Beautiful, beautiful woman. She's a Pilates instructor. She knows that she's attractive, and she can sometimes lean into like this adversarial position with her cousin, especially like during childhood when she wasn't advocating for her cousin, when she was being relentlessly teased. But she does genuinely love Jasmine. They share the house that Grandma Nellie left them. And I think what's interesting is that in Palm Springs, Mia experiences something new to her. She's overlooked by, these Nigerian doctors, and Tunde kind of like has laser vision on Jasmine. And so the Nigerian men that they go hang out with at that fundraiser aren't really interested in her and kind of making fun of her, which, I mean, they didn't have to make all the skinny jokes, but considering how many fat jokes there are, the skinny jokes need to catch up, I guess, to balance things out. But the movie lets Mia feel the disinterest from other people without making her like too much of a villain, right? It quietly kind of flips the script and lets her sit in what Jasmine and Stacy feel all the time when it comes to being rejected romantically. So I like that Mia loves her cousin. She sees her cousin as a full person who is beautiful and who has dreams. She shows up for her cousin. I think it's a really interesting dynamic to have the contrast that happens when Jasmine and Mia are together, to see the script flipped on them, but not to have them go at it or be adversarial necessarily because of it. So I think that was a very interesting way to handle their relationship. Now, quickly, we're going to talk about Ramon. Now, I haven't talked about Ramon at all, but Ramon is Jasmine and Stacy's coworker at Bloomfields. He is this supportive man who believes in Jasmine's dreams. He hypes her up. He comes up with, an acronym for FAT, the PHAT one, pretty hot and thick or something like that. Or pretty hot and thick. I think that's it. He gets points for effort, but I would be doing y'all a disservice if I didn't say quite plainly that Ramon is a little bit of a problem. Okay. Now, Ramon is written as a gay character who speaks in AAVE, and the performance, for whatever reason, is giving Steve Martin in Bringing Down the House at the end of the movie, where he's like in the hood. And I can't. He's like a collection of stereotypes dressed up as a supportive friend. And I think that if you were to have a character like that was going to be supportive, that you could give them less stereotypical ways of being and direction. And so he is one of the things that's actually kind of problematic with this film and don't hold up for me. So I just wanted to mention that very quickly. But let's move on to these love interests. We have Dr. Tunde and Dr. Akibo, who are our romantic catalyst, right? So again, they're not saviors. They are this kind of precipitating event that helps our two kind of main ladies reach the next stage in their own love and acceptance and in their own stories. So one thing that I want to point out is that Dr. Tunde is played by Jimmy Jean-Louis and Dr. Akibo is played by Godfrey. Both two very attractive men, okay? And I think it's very interesting that in this story, we get to see these men be fully objectified. It's actually kind of rare, I think, for them to be objectified on this level. And what I mean is, like, we hear inner dialogue, mostly from Monique's character, Jasmine, where they are objectified really bad. Dr. Tunde is coming out of the pool and the camera is, panning down to his midsection, and it's like in a movie about plus size women, the men are arguably objectified more. And while I don't necessarily agree with objectification, I think it's interesting that we are doing it in this way and kind of flipping the genders a little bit. So I think it's a little touchy, but I like the idea of the subversion. Now, what I really appreciate about these romantic interests is that they express their attraction publicly, okay? And I want to talk about that because they don't really mention it in the story. But I know in real life, there are men who are genuinely attracted to plus size women, but they keep those women as secrets. They don't want to be seen with someone who does not fit this conventional standard. So there are a lot of women who are somebody's preference in private, but nobody's choice in public. And I love that Tunde and Akibo don't do that. They are openly, enthusiastically into these women. And at the Nigerian dinner, Jasmine and Stacey are some of the most desired women in the room while Mia is sitting on the sidelines. So I know for a fact that there are people who will hide, the people that they are truly interested in. And that is its own hurtful thing. So I love that these men are out in public and kind of proudly and normally, like being normal about being seen with the person that they're interested in. I also want to be clear about something else, because I feel like their attraction is not a fetish. Okay. I think that it's a beauty standard that's rooted in their own cultural context. And I think that that's the distinction. I feel like a fetish, and I feel like I don't want to kink shame anyone. If there are two consenting adults who are fully on board with that type of play. But for me personally, I was never into being someone's fetish as a plus size woman, because to me, it doesn't feel like genuine attraction. To me, it feels like the worst version of objectification. And so for me, that just would never work. Okay. But in this instance, this movie doesn't feel like fetishization of these plus size women. They see these women remind them of the women back home in Nigeria, and they like what they see and they are genuinely pursuing them. So I like that. To me, I can distinguish this from fetishization. Now let's talk about Tunde's respectability politics moment, where he is tone policing Jasmine's language about her using the term bitch colloquially. Now I want him to stay out of it. Okay. Stay out of it, bucko. Okay. I don't like the tone policing thing. It just bothers me so much. So that's really my kind of one drawback about Tunde a little bit. But what I will say is that his line about her never being a size 5, again, revolutionary. I talked a little bit about that earlier. And this kind of explicit acknowledgement that some bodies aren't built to be small, having it being said by a medical professional without apology. Again, I've never heard it anywhere else, only in this movie, literally. So I love that there is some consideration that bodies are meant to be different. And, as long as you're healthy, who cares? Now, here's the thing that I have been thinking about a little bit deeply. Okay. And I'm going to get a little bit personal here. So, I have wrestled with, in all romantic comedies, really, or all romance movies, about whether or not a woman should need a man to evolve in her own story on whatever aspect that is, like whether it's her career, whether it's her self-worth, whatever it is. I've wrestled with whether a woman should need a man to realize her own worth or her potential. And I feel like in an ideal world, the answer to that is no. But I've been with my husband for about 11 and a half years. And when we first got together, I had my own suspicions about why he wanted me. Like, I kept waiting for a catch. But the more that he showed up consistently and loved on me and affirmed me and refused to pull the rug out from underneath me, the more I started to believe him. And so he was the catalyst for me in realizing my own worth. And so eventually, through the love and the affirmation and my own personal work and going to therapy, I got there and recognized my own worth. And so I actually can see how someone coming into your life and treating you differently and treating you better, or the way that you're supposed to be treated, can really be life-changing for you. So while it would have been nice for me to not have the internalized fat phobia to deprogram from in the first place, I do recognize that sometimes circumstances or people have to come into your life to help turn things around for you. So sometimes that's a dude. So when I watch Tunde and Akibo, I don't necessarily see women needing men to validate them. I just see their external affirmation activating something that was already present within these ladies. So the affirmation didn't create their self-worth. It just kind of sparked it. And that's the reason why the transformation stuck for both of these women, because they did the internal work as well. Like, Tunde and Akibo just cracked the door open, and Jasmine and Stacey walked through. So I really like that element about this story. Now let's move on to talk about some core themes. First, we'll start with the internalized fat phobia. Okay. The fact that they showed two different ways to carry the same type of wound was very interesting. We have two distinct responses to the same external pressure. Jasmine is the fighter with the armor, and she's loud and confrontational and will come for you if you come for her. Stacy is in hide mode. She shrinks, she covers up, she's quiet, she makes herself invisible, right? And so we have these two different responses to the same thing. And I love that the movie doesn't frame either of them as necessarily weaknesses or strengths. It just says like, this is what fat phobia does to people, or internalized fat phobia does to people. It gets inside you and you carry it differently depending on your perspective. Now, the other core theme is diet culture, capitalism, and the cycle that profits off your insecurity. Now, Jasmine has an arsenal of diet supplements, and the movie kind of plays it up for laughs a little bit, but it shows how desperately she wants to conform to a standard of the culture that basically says this is the path to having the life that you want. You're not going to get a man if you're not skinny. You're not going to have nice clothes if you're not skinny. You're not going to have success in life if you're not skinny. Okay. And so capitalism is ready for that desperation and ready to take advantage of it. Okay. Entire industries are built on those insecurities. And of course, people are not in the business of solving the problem, because a solved problem doesn't buy you more supplements. Okay. So I think in 2026, this kind of hits differently, or hits the same, I guess. We're in a full cultural moment around medications like Ozempic and other GLP-1 drugs. Okay. And of course, I'm not here to judge anyone or tell anyone what to do with their body. That's your business. You talk to your medical professional and work it out. But I think that the conversation happening right now about these medications, maybe the pressure that people feel to use them and the way they're being marketed, I think it rhymes loudly with what's happening in this movie around the diet supplements, even 20 years ago. So the name changes, but the cycle stays the same, right? And so this cycle also includes things like fast food deserts that make it hard for people, especially in low-income communities or communities of color, to maintain a certain kind of lifestyle, right? We have a fat ass burger on the corner and it's cheap. And it's the same culture that created those conditions that will also try to sell you the cure. And if it doesn't work, you'll just buy something different, right? And so meanwhile, fat phobia shows up in these other areas of your life too, right? So you may not get promoted at work. There is research that shows that overweight employees face measurably lower promotion rates and higher workplace bias. There is issues with fitting into spaces like airplane seats. There are issues with having fashionable clothing options available to you. And if they are available, they are limited. They might be more expensive. They're unflattering because the fashion industry has decided that you only get to look good if you're skinny. And that's not totally true. There are certain stores that do cater to plus size women, but there just really aren't enough. Okay. Now, these kind of structural barriers are dressed up as personal failures. And I think that this movie shows all of that with these different things that happen in her life, right? We have Jasmine's boss, who we haven't talked about before, but he was blocking her from talking with the buyer who would eventually go on to help kick off her clothing line. We have the loan officer who is denying her the money that she needs for a clothing line for women who are a part of an underserved market. And also him saying that she should do Jenny Craig in the same breath. She ripped his toupee off and he deserved more, okay? And so these people are not just antagonists. They are the representation of the system that upholds and maintains the fat phobia that she deals with and that she's fighting against. And on fashion, things have improved. We have stores like Lane Bryant and Torrid that exist. I personally love ThredUp, and a lot of the plus size clothing that they have is sourced from Lane Bryant and Torrid. They have a lot of great, plus size offerings, and it lets me be intentional about how I shop. They're not sponsoring, but they totally could. So we do see that some progress has been made, but the underlying attitude that this movie critiques is still very present. Okay. And lastly, let's talk about beauty standards and the Nigerian cultural context. Now, in this movie, the cultural context that Tunde and Akibo come from shows that a fuller figure woman is associated with beauty, wealth, and status. It's the standard and not a consolation prize, okay? The film uses this to completely invert the power dynamic that we've been watching, not only in this movie, but in real time. Suddenly, Jasmine and Stacy are the most desirable women in the room, and Mia is the one that's being overlooked. And the movie is smart to let Mia feel that, because I think it crystallizes something important. That beauty standards are not universal truths. They are cultural constructs. And the one Jasmine and Stacy have been torturing themselves trying to meet is just one of many. And it's not necessarily the correct one. Now, the movie also handles Nigerian cultural references. I'm kind of mixed on that, okay? There are these genuinely humanizing touches where we learn things about Nigerian food and dance and culture, the warmth of, their community, and the specificity of the Nigerian identity that you can feel even from the director's own background, even though she's not Nigerian, she's Ethiopian. And I feel like that matters because West African representation in American media has historically not been very kind. But Jasmine and the other lady say some things early on that are like stereotypical and are probably true to what people have as perceptions about West African or Nigerian culture, but it also doesn't feel good. In Jasmine's inner monologue, she literally calls Tunde a spear-throwing Mandingo, and it's like, girl. It's one thing to say that you find this man attractive, but to say those types of things, he's a doctor. I mean, come on. Some of those things make me uncomfortable is one of the things that I feel like doesn't necessarily hold up very well about this movie, okay? But then there are also these other assumptions about Nigerian men and culture, like they're being chauvinistic or bringing up female circumcision. And these are, misconceptions that real people hold. And the movie addresses them with Jasmine directly asking Tunde about them. And so on some level, I appreciate the honesty, but I feel like some of it really lands with the thud and it comes across as kind of insensitive, okay? So those are my thoughts, y'all. And we have to ask the same two questions that we ask every time we do one of these reviews. Does it hold up today? And is it worth revisiting? So here are my thoughts. I think Phat Girlz holds up pretty well. Not totally, but pretty well. Now, going into this movie, I didn't think it was going to, okay? I expected it to feel dated, to lean too hard into stereotypes, to handle some of the themes clumsily. And I kind of want to be upfront about that because this movie surprised me in rewatching it. I probably haven't seen it in maybe 15-ish years. So I'm kind of shocked that even for 2026, this movie is still kind of revolutionary and features things in it that we still don't get to see very often today. Now, let me start where this movie doesn't hold up for me, okay? Visually, the green screen is rough, okay? The non-licensed music, hard to listen to, okay? The low budget limitations show, all right. And then of course there are a few moments that I want to flag, right? There's insensitive comments about Nigerian culture. Mia has this throwaway line about if a man isn't attracted to her, he must be gay. So it's like, okay, there's some homophobia in there. And then there's Ramon, who was just a collection of stereotypes and cornrows. He's in cornrows at one point in the story. And he's doing the AAVE, and I can't get behind it, okay? And then there's also the food thing, which I haven't really touched on very much yet. And one of the problems that I have with a lot of stories that focus on plus size women is that they focus a little too much on the food element. And it's like, she's already a plus size woman. We kind of figured out how she got there. We don't need to over index on the food stuff and making them eat at every 10 seconds in the freaking movie. And while this movie doesn't necessarily make food a constant focus, but when it goes there, it goes there. Okay, so there's a buffet scene where she's getting her food at the restaurant before she goes off on Tunde and his white colleague. The way she's crying and saying grace over this buffet. And mind you, the food looked good and there was some hilarity with the way she was naming the food that she was getting. It's like, oh, let me get a little bit of lobster. And it was funny. But crying when she's saying grace? Come on now. There's Fat Ass Burger and her order at the Fat Ass Burger. There's Jasmine walking down the street just randomly eating fries. I mean, as a big woman, I enjoy food, but it's not always on my mind. I have other things going on in my life. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you're a skinny or thin actor in a story, you might never eat. Like if you sit down at a meal and have a conversation with somebody, they're not focusing on you eating the meal. They're focusing on the conversation. And I'm come on, y'all. Our lives are not all the way, organized around eating. Okay. Again, Monique is funny in these moments, but like it feels a little gratuitous. Not as bad as other films, but still gratuitous. I also want to address the use of fat euphemisms, like fat with a PH, pretty hot and thick madame. And I understand the impulse to reclaim or to rebrand a word that has become more taboo over time. But as I've been deconstructing and sitting with this concept of body neutrality as a framework, where I've landed is that fat is just a descriptor, okay? It describes a body type and it's not an insult unless we treat it like one. And I think when we come up with all of these alternative terms, what we're doing, like kind of unintentionally even, is reinforcing that the word fat is too shameful to sit with. And that we have to rename it to be acceptable. Like when we think about certain animals, for instance, elephants, we call elephants fat. However, they are elephant-sized elephants. they just are who they are, and their body type is just what it is. And I feel like fat can be a descriptor and have it just be okay because it's neutral and not have the nastiness and vitriol and the discrimination and bias behind it. I think that there's a way for us to have that word mean what it means and not have all of the nastiness behind it, okay? I do think that some alternative terms are acceptable, plus size. I think that that's reasonable. But sometimes the euphemisms feel like separating yourself from something that is just neutral. So Tunde's respectability politics also don't sit well with me, with the tone policing and all of that. Those few little things that I don't think hold up very well are kind of small compared to the things that I think that the movie actually does do really well. We have two plus size kind of leading characters. We get to see them be involved in sexual situations, for them to have happy endings, for them to love on themselves and not necessarily have it to where they're being rescued by a man. It talks about all of those things that we talked about earlier about diet culture and about food culture and capitalism. And it finds a way to bring in things that exist in real life that matter on a grand scale for a lot of people. And it manages to do it in a way that is still funny, that we still find ways to have our expectations subverted. And it does it in a way that's really fun to watch and it's entertaining. So I really enjoy it. And so for me, I recognize that fatphobia is kind of one of the last socially acceptable forms of bigotry. Like while we've made real progress in making other forms of discrimination increasingly taboo and costly, fat bias is kind of one of the ones that's the last dominoes to fall, right? Because there's this assumption that someone's body size is a personal moral failure that warrants them being excluded. And that's just not true. We're still just not in a space to fully accept people for who they are. And so at some point, we're going to have to reach the stage where fat phobia is no longer an acceptable form of bigotry. Okay. And when I look at our current media landscape, it's still genuinely rare to see a plus size person as a romantic lead, as an object of desire, as a main character whose love story is treated with full weight. No pun intended. And so we have made some progress, not as much as we should have in 20 years, which means that this movie is still in some ways revolutionary. So what it does well, it does really well. It centers these two plus size Black women as fully realized protagonists with dreams and desires and these complicated inner lives. There are sex scenes. There are romantic leads who pursue them openly. There's a fashion arc. There's a business arc. There's an emotional arc. And it critiques diet culture and the fashion industry and systemic racism and capitalism and, even food deserts, all while being funny and not being preachy, which is the perfect balance, right? So it even includes a brief moment of mentioning male fat phobia, acknowledging that this isn't just a women's issue. And so the skinny cousin is never necessarily a villain. She's also not really a buffoon. She's just a person who loves her family member and has her own humbling moment. And most importantly, these women rescue themselves. Nobody saves them. They save themselves. So for a romantic comedy, that is something, okay? The humor mostly still lands. The emotional arc feels real. The body image struggles feel not just contemporary, but kind of timeless. And the fact that we are still in 2026 having the same conversations about diet culture, representation, who gets to be romantic leads, that's not a sign that this movie aged poorly. It's a sign that it was onto something, okay? So to me, Phat Girlz holds up. Now, is the movie worth revisiting? I'm going to say yes. And I think it may depend on who you are. If you are or have ever been a plus size person, you can watch it and ask yourself, do you see yourself in Jasmine? Do you see yourself in Stacy? Are you a Mia? Does this movie still apply? Because I think for a lot of us, the answer is yes in more ways than we expected. And if you've never moved through the world in a larger body, this movie could be genuinely eye-opening for you. It kind of puts you inside of that experience through comedy. I think it's accessible, but not preachy. Yeah. I think it just shows you what it is. And I think that there's value in that. I do want to say also that I think this movie is very Black. So I think that the fact that this is a cross-cultural lens plays a lot into this movie. And we're going to get into that later when I talk a little bit about the reviews. Okay. Now, I think this movie is funny. It has a lot of heart. It has Monique giving an emotionally raw performance as well as a great comedic performance. And it does something that not enough movies do then or now. It says that these women are worthy of being the center of the story, not despite their bodies, but just as they are. So I think that's a worthy message in 2006 and today. Now, before I let y'all go, let's talk ratings. Now, critics gave Phat Girlz a 21%. That might be the lowest of any movie that we've reviewed here. But the audience gave it 65%, which is nearly more than triple than what the critics gave it. And I feel like that gap tells you everything. The critics' consensus says that the film has good intentions, but is sloppily made and thin on laughs. And when I look at the individual reviews, something kind of jumped out at me. There's a woman critic who gives it a B, and she's like, this is a bit of a mess, but it's unexpectedly sweet, and that its amateurishness gives it freshness and authenticity. And I can work with that. I think that that is a genuine look at the actual movie. But then there is a white male critic who gives it a C- and describes Jasmine as a grating, belligerent woman who alternates between self-deprecating fat jokes and drama. And I need to say this plainly. That review is rancid with misogyny war, okay? the specific intersection of racism and sexism that is directed at Black women. Now, calling Monique's character belligerent is a word that has been weaponized against Black women to dismiss their justified responses to being mistreated. And to hear that from what appears to be a white male critic is disappointing. It's not necessarily a film critique. It's more about having a lens problem. The crazy thing is that if you actually really watch this movie with a discerning or watchful eye, Jasmine is not starting trouble. She's funny, she's warm, she's the life of the party, and she puts herself out there. But when somebody tries her, insults her, demeans her, disrespects her, that's when she responds accordingly. And that is not belligerence, okay? That's a woman who learned early that she had to protect herself because the world wasn't going to do it for her. And that is exactly why I started this podcast, to review movies that have been evaluated almost exclusively through lenses that are not designed to understand them. And as a plus-size Black woman myself, I can look at this film and see things that a white male critic simply is not equipped to see. Not because he's necessarily a bad person, because I don't know him, but because his lived experience does not include moving through the world in this body, in this skin, or to even really be understanding or accepting of that. So yeah, the audience score of 65% makes far more sense to me, because the audience for this film, plus size women, Black women, people who saw themselves on screen as a romantic lead, maybe for the first time, they get it. Okay. So my personal rating is, like a 70% from Phat Girlz, all right? It gets points for cultural significance, emotional authenticity, Monique's performance, and the way it handles themes with a little bit more nuance than it gets credit for. We docking points for Raymond, the food tropes, the visual limitations, because, low budgets, okay? And Tunde's respectability politics, okay? But this movie deserved better from the critics, and the audience score reflects that. All right, home slices, that is a wrap on my 20th anniversary review of Phat Girlz here on Sup Media Reviews. Now, I want to hear from you. Does this movie hold up for you? Have you revisited it recently, or are you about to for the first time? Do you agree with the Rotten Tomatoes scores, or do you agree with my ratings? Let me know over on our social media pages. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, and TikTok. And speaking of, we actually have a review coming up for another movie in honor of Women's History Month. It is going to be Mean Girls, and two of my sisters are going to join me to review a movie that we hold very near and dear to our heart. So make sure if you're not already subscribed to do so, okay? Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, and don't miss it. Again, this was a review from our Women's History Month series, and there's more good stuff coming your way. So thanks so much for hanging out with me, listening and watching, and for being a part of this community. It genuinely means a lot to me. All right, y'all. That's it. Peace out. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of Sup Media Reviews. New episodes drop just about every week, and our brand new YouTube series is coming your way. So make sure you follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Pinterest, and Facebook so you never miss a thing. Got a movie, album, or show you think we should review? Send it our way. Until next time, keep watching, keep listening, and just chill. Till the next episode.